Oh, I'm crying. Oh, this is really, really sweet. I think that this honestly is something where this hits a lot harder if you read between all the lines of this conversation, right? I'm thinking about Seungmin and some of the lines of the music as well. I haven't done my deep dive on my theory that Get Lit is a song about suicide, but I have a theory that Get Lit is a song about suicide. And that would sort of align with some of this. Seungmin's note here is all about wanting Han to still be here, right? Like how glad he is that Han is here. How glad he is that he is able to make music that they both love with him. The things, that sort of strengths-based perspective of like, this year you seem to be doing better. It's really nice to see that you're doing better, right? Like that's important to him because he's, he loves him. So like this is all about that reaffirmation of that love, and that love is permanent, right? That love is going to keep going, and that Seungmin doesn't want to lose these things that they do together. That's fine. We will.
와, 나 이때 몸 좋았다.
That's cool. We'll just sort of restart.
인상이 맑았네. 진짜 옛날 사진인데 얼굴이 좀 맑네요. 이때는 좀 악의 기운이 덜 느껴지는 사진입니다.
So straight-faced. Hold on. I need to see if he makes like some type of smirk before he says that unhinged line.
사진입니다.
Do I get a Seungmin smirk to find out that I'm about to hear something absolutely wild from him? Yeah, there it is. There's that tiny little Seungmin smirk. It's so small. I bet people who know him really well have learned to identify when there's just like this little bit of a smirk coming from him.
사진입니다. 이것도 좋고요. 이것도 좋네. 애 뮤직비디오 찍었을 때 같은데. 애 때네요.
네가 승민이냐? 되게 이거 현진이 같이 나왔다.
70% 정도? 워낙에 이제 본인의 이야기를 한번 꺼내는데 좀 많이 걸리는 친구인 것 같아서 70% 정도.
진짜 하나도 몰라요. 전 저 친구에 대해서 아무것도 몰라요. 그래서 헤어졌어요.
That's why we broke up. I was waiting to see if Han would give any insight into why he thinks he doesn't know anything about Seungmin, which again I think is likely bullshit, but that maybe Han's perception of what it is to know things about another person is maybe a little skewed. Yeah, Seungmin is very level-headed, and this actually, every single time I see Seungmin answer this question again since the Seungbin episode, it breaks my heart a little bit more from Seungbin, because Seungmin is always very consistently very reasonable and level-headed about his answers to the question of how well do you think you know this person. And that just means that his answer of 120% with Seungbin was like his version of level-headed, which is insane. Because yeah, like every single time he gives like a very like thoughtful, rational, based in like really thinking about it answer. So that means 120% is like solid. And that makes me insane. That drives me up a wall. I can't handle it. Am I ever going to watch an episode of 2KidsRoom with Seungmin that doesn't make me crash out about Seungbin again? Ever? Am I ever going to be able to not crash out about Seungbin? No.
카멜레온? 본인의 모습을 좀 시시각각 잘 바꾸는 것 같았어.
미지의 아이.
Oh.
생긴 거랑
Oh, wait, hold on. Wait. Hold on.
카멜레온? 본인의 모습을 좀 시시각각 잘 바꾸는 것 같았어.
미지의 아이.
Ooh. Okay. And the thing is that I have a decent amount of trust in Seungmin's interpretation of other people's characteristics. Perhaps more than like I need to, right? But I do have some of that trust because he is pretty consistently basing things on like actual information. So, you know, for instance, Felix, I have very little trust in Felix's perception of like other people. I only have trust that Felix's perception is true for Felix, because it does seem to be like very off the mark sometimes for how other people describe people. But Seungmin has been pretty consistent in line with other data, other information, other people. So it's really interesting to use the term chameleon. And like I'm making some connections to the idea of alien as well, but like we sort of overlap those. And we get this chameleon alien, like this person who does not really fit in, but has learned to adapt to surroundings. And once again, we come back to what I said very, very, very early on, first 2KidsRoom reaction of and how we got to my little autism banner joke, which is if you really deeply relate to Han Ji-sung, I highly recommend that you check out embraceautism.com. Having somebody else sort of validate the chameleon concept is very interesting. I haven't heard that one really from any of the other kids about Han. And I think it does sort of track, though, based on some of the things we have heard, right? That sort of difference in his energy on camera and off camera. You know, I think even the difference between when he's in groups versus when he's like on individual lives, the whole like duality of the like hard rapper versus the baby girl, the way his fashion changes, his makeup changes, his public persona changes is very in line with people who learn to become high camouflaging autistic. That is super common experience, sometimes to the point that people will struggle to believe that they have their own internal identity, because their external behaviors are so malleable that they wonder if just everything they're doing, they're making up, which is like a little bit yes, a little bit no. You know, we can't fake who we are. All of the decisions we're making for a reason. So there is no like nothing I do is really me, because everything you do is you. That it doesn't work like that, right? But it can be really difficult to identify how all of these parts and all of these different reflections of you are true. We have an ad now, which is good timing because I would have gone on a really long tangent if that ad hadn't shown up. like a really long tangent. This is something I talk to people about a lot. Yeah, I won't continue that tangent because it would have lasted about an hour.
생긴 거랑 성격이랑 진짜 다르잖아요. 생긴 건 진짜 후행할 것 같은데 한 번 빠지면 진짜 깊이 들어가서 미친 사람처럼 해내고. 그러니까 보는 것과 이미지가 달라서 위지아이.
What the fuck does this mean? I don't think that this is a translation issue. I think that this is a Han issue. I think it's been long enough since I watched a Han episode that I forgot that I have a hard time keeping track of Han's thought process.
한번 빠지면
He
진짜
looks
깊이
like he
들어가서
goes off something.
미친 사람처럼 해내고.
But then he goes deep and does it like a madman.
보는 것과
Yeah.
이미지가 달라서
Because of
위지아이.
the very possible autism. We continue to have the whole he finds a thing and then once he finds that thing, that is his thing for the rest of forever. We continue to have that affirmed and validated. Now, this might be an I'm too autistic thing. I don't understand the what you see doesn't match their personality thing unless it's in like real extremes. I only understand that idea in like really, really strong extremes. So I don't really know what the fuck Han is getting at here. If somebody does understand what Han is getting at, like tell me so that I can have an opinion on it. But I don't know what the fuck he's talking about here.
내 X가 저쪽에 들어가 있나?
Han, that's not even your. Were they X's on Exchange Island? No, they weren't. Were they? I thought Seungmin was. What is the X? Which universe are they X's in? Help me. Stop writing fan fiction when I'm trying to do a therapist reaction, Han. I can't do a therapist reaction on your fucking... Oh, the business one is where they're X's. Oh. Okay. Han, stop writing fan fiction for Skiz Code. I can't keep track of it. Is it nap time?
나다.
It would have been really funny if it were someone else.
아, 왜 와플을 가져다 놨어요? 아, 몰라. 그냥 먹어.
에이 뭐 언제까지
어?
언제까지 식단을 하는 게 목표가 뭐야?
나?
응.
몰라. 그냥 하려고 했어. 큰 목표는 없어.
그러니까
Huh. Yeah, I do actually remember that I did see someone say something about this. Yeah, the kind of evidence towards like, not everything that they do is determined by themselves. What I have a feeling is the case. My guess, fully just based on like personal experience in corporate, plus my understanding of like these boys, plus like what Chan has said about the company versus what Han has said about the company. My guess is that the managers or the company, whatever that means, will make strong suggestions. And those strong suggestions may or may not be worded like demands. And if one of the kids says, like, no, fuck off, there's probably some room for that. There's probably quite a bit of room for the kids to be like, I'm not going to do that. right? I have a hard time believing that like Han is forced to diet, but they've never, tried to pressure Changbin to diet. And I think Changbin has even said that they did try to, and he just like didn't, right? So this is very common in corporate as well. This also is common, I mean, in any type of hierarchical relationship, I'd say, where if you're willing to do a little bit of advocacy, like self-advocacy, it's not actually that hard to push back on demands. And some places, it's actually surprisingly easy. But if you don't have the either the skills to do self-advocacy or the confidence to do self-advocacy or a combination of either, then you just do everything that is requested of you and sort of interpret that as requirements of the position that you are in. And that may or may not be true. So in this case, right, like my guess would be that there was a strong recommendation for him to diet for some fucking reason. Obviously, if you have ever experienced any of my content, you know my opinions about that. But, there was some recommendation for some fucking reason, and it wasn't worth it to him for whatever reason. Or, to strongly enough say no, right? Maybe he tried to say no and they like kind of pushed back and he didn't want to say no strong enough. Maybe he just didn't care enough to say no. He had other things that he was trying to say no to, and there is only so much, political currency you can expend at once, right? Maybe he was spending all of his political currency on trying to stop getting flack for showing off his tattoos. I don't know. Ultimately, a lot of times, like, the only real leverage a company has often is in the case of, like, sometimes fines, depending on the contract. But if there's not fines in the contract, it's like, what are you going to do? Fire me? And a lot of times, like, people with enough chutzpah can get away with kind of pulling that move as much as they like. But if you have a little less chutzpah, you've got a little less, of that, like, anti-authoritarian spunk in you, maybe you have a lot of anxiety, right? Whatever it is, there's sort of this fear that there will be some kind of, accountability mechanism that comes after you, or just like you really don't like being scolded, like you really don't like people being like, stop fucking doing that, you really don't like people being on your ass about something, or there is some other type of accountability mechanism that's much darker that can happen too, and like kind of abusive and maybe generate some type of hostile workplace or something like that, wherein, because there's not a like forcing function from like a contract perspective, instead people like say nasty shit about your body, right? They go like, okay, I understand you don't want to diet, that's okay, it's okay to be a little chubby even as an idol, right? Like there's some type of they will attempt to get you to do things through much more manipulative or abusive means. Obviously, I have no idea kind of which of these is happening here, but I have to assume there is something that is not just like JYPE holds the contract and so you have to do what they say, because it is inconsistent who follows certain rules and when rules are followed, and when they're not. So I have to assume there is some type of personality difference in how people do self-advocacy, probably as well also in like which managers they're working with or things like that, that change their reaction to that type of request.
큰 목표는 없어.
그러니까
그쪽에서 토크할 거야? 너 방송이 장난이니?
네, 일어나기가 너무 귀찮아.
알죠?
근데 넌 단계 왜 좋아?
And then also like here's the other thing is that they in this case they could legitimately Han could legitimately be talking about dieting not for the purpose of like a lost goal but like changing his diet. Like it could be that he's referring to what he is eating in his totality and that perhaps he is simply eating a lot of sugary sweet foods, and what he's been told is that like you need to adjust your diet to like have a vegetable in it. That's possible. But also what's interesting is him saying I have to diet and then just immediately
네, 일어나기가 너무 귀찮아.
알죠?
근데 넌
뭐야? 너 방송이 장난이니?
eating a
네,
waffle
일어나기가
anyway.
너무 귀찮아.
So
근데 넌
I love
단계 왜
that for
좋아?
him.
단계 왜 좋냐고? 맛있으니까.
와플이 좋아?
옛날엔 크로플을 더 좋아했지.
크로플이 뭐야?
이거랑 비슷하게 생긴 건데 크로플이 좀 더 딱딱해.
아, 한때 유행했던 사이즈? 그 요만한 거.
그치?
아, 넌 뭐 할 때 행복하니? 너 막 산책 이런 거 싫어하잖아, 그지?
좋아하지? 나 투어 갔을 때 맨날 산책했잖아.
왜 몰랐지? 제가 생각보다 애들에 대해서 모르는 게 진짜 많군요.
아 굳이 그거를 누구한테 말?
Came back after talking to Hyunjin.
제가
I love that
생각보다
note of like and it's super funny because I think part of the reason why they're like noting this and talking about this is because Seungmin is very self-aware of how much he doesn't know. So in some ways, him knowing some of the most about the guys means that he is far more aware of what he doesn't know. This is a little bit of it's not Dunning-Kruger. It's shit. What's the inverse one? I have to look this up now because I need to know. I know that there is fuck. Whatever. There's sort of like an inverse where the more you know, the more you become aware of how much you don't know. Like there's a certain level of knowledge that makes you aware of your lack of knowledge. And I think that like we're seeing a little bit of that here. And that Seungmin has like, compared to a lot of the guys, except maybe Changbin, and maybe that's also part of it, is that like Seungmin and Changbin seem to have the most consistent and strong understanding of what's going on in the group. And so there's also like who is Seungmin primarily comparing himself to. That yeah, I have a feeling that that's a little bit about what's going on here.
애들에 대해서 모르는 게 진짜 많군요.
아 굳이 그거를 누구한테 말하고 가진 않으니까.
뭐 원래 방에만 있지 않았었니?
답답해서.
성향은 변하지.
근데 너는 만약에 우리 둘이 외출하고 싶다면 어딜 나갈 것 같냐? 나를 야구장에 데려간다면
안 데려갈 것 같은데.
만약에 들어간다면
안 데려갈 것 같아.
만약에 들어간다면 나 야구 룰을 아예 몰라가지고
나 자체도 야구장 안 간지 좀 오래돼서 야구장에 데려간다면은 좋은 선호하는 뷰가 있단 말이야.
Oh man, I didn't talk at all about Seungmin's life choices and where he sat. This is important. Okay, wait. Let's assess this. Why the bed this time? Well, he tried to sit in that one corner and he didn't really stay there. I don't think he really liked that corner that he sat in with Hyunjin because he ended up moving away from that corner. And it wasn't like a true corner. This is a much truer corner. So that makes sense to me. Yeah, like this is a more valid corner than the corner he was in before, I think.
야구장에 데려간다면은 좋은 선호하는 뷰가 있단 말이야, 야구장.
뷰?
근데 그런데 앉아서 이제 아마 맛있는 거 좀 먹고 그게 분위기가 되게 좋아. 한 번쯤 시도해볼 만해.
근데 이제 요즘 야구 열풍이잖아.
맞아.
그쪽을 지나 택시 타고 지나가면 와, 그 시간 잘못 잡으면은 똑같은 곳에서
잠시
10분 정도 정체돼 있어.
맞아.
그래서 와, 저거 나갈 때 진짜 빡세겠다.
그래서 뭐 예를 들어 경기 끝나기 직전에 나오거나 하시는 분들도 있는데 근데 너가 스포츠를 막 그닥 좋아하는 편은 아니니까
맞아.
취미가 좀 다른 건 맞는 것 같아. 그 결이 좀 많이 다르니까.
성향이 진짜 다르지 너랑 나랑.
너는 이제 만화 같은 거 좋아하고 나는
그치.
약간 상상 만화
현실적인
이런
거.
아예 안 좋아.
I
스포츠 좋아하고.
don't like imagination. I'm sorry, just the statement. I don't like imagination. um, I'd be really curious as well about Seungmin's visualization capacity, actually. There's a few things that I've found of people who don't like imagination, which can mean a few different things. I'm going to, in this case, extrapolate that sort of what he means is I don't really like daydreaming, and I don't really like the types of things that come from fictional daydreaming. Like that, I am not interested in sort of the utilizing my time to engage in fiction and fictional daydreaming. Daydreaming is a really important part of the human brain. The human brain is built to daydream. I think the estimate is like 40 to 50% of our waking hours. Our brain really, really, really wants to daydream. And so people are like, well, then why don't I? And there's a few different reasons I've found. One, very literal thinking can be difficult for daydreaming. Two, minimized visualization skills, very difficult for daydreaming. Three, sometimes we get being super busy, right? If you're too busy, you have no time to daydream, and so you don't build any skills in it. Four, dissociation can be a big one. Five, not knowing how to daydream, like what to daydream about. And like what will happen is a lot of people will end up having some type of anxiety thinking about daydreaming. There's some idea in them that it's like a waste of time or not a valuable use of time. So they'll start to get really stressed about the idea of wasting time. Perhaps there is a like background radiation noise of either anxiety or existential dread or, you know, anger or something. So when there's not much going on and they sort of sit with themselves in their own mind, all of that really rises to the surface. So there's sometimes as well, there's also the people will think that daydreaming is about like sitting there in absolute silence and staring out the window. So people will be understimulated while they daydream. So me, for example, I personally, ideally, it depends on how I'm feeling, right? But ideally, I usually spend between 1 to 3 hours a day with my headphones on, listening to music, and either walking or pacing and daydreaming. And that's pretty intentional for a number of reasons. And it helps me both get exercise, it helps me listen to music, which is something that I enjoy, and it helps me daydream, which is something my brain needs. It's very, very important for our minds. So there's a lot of reasons why I've found that why people hate imagination or don't like imagination, don't like daydreaming, don't like engaging in that type of stuff. I found that it's pretty rare that, I mean, I have not, upon interrogating the question, personally encountered anybody who like just legitimately is totally uninterested in imagination. Like upon interrogating, asking the questions, sort of leading down the rabbit holes, I've always sort of come to sort of one of those answers. I'm sure there's probably other reasons. I've never encountered another one. So that's that.
하니까
딱 그거야. 너가 외적으로 봤을 때는 진짜 여리여리하고 막 내가 차라리 막 그런 막 축구나 막 이런 거 좋아할 것 같은데 완전 반대야.
그지 만화 좋아하는 애들끼리 막 영화 보러 가고 그러지 않나? 아니 너 혼자 봤나 이번에?
나 혼자 봤는데. 와 근데 슈퍼플렉스 진짜 크더라.
그게 뭐야?
슈퍼플렉스가 영화관에서 진짜 큰 곳이 있어.
아니 근데 왜 뭐야 뭐 현진 리노 안 가고 혼자 갔어?
그러니까 그거 내가 너무 좋아하는 영화니까 사실 울 것도 같고 울 것도 같아가지고
아니 그냥 온전히 집중하고 싶었다.
내가 예전에 그 우리 친형이랑 신과 함께를 보러 갔었어. 나 연습생 때. 근데 나는 단 한 번도 영화를 보면서
Oh, they communicate in totally different ways. Like totally different ways. Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. I wanna go back a little bit because this back and forth is really fascinating.
그러지 않나? 아니 너 혼자 봤나 이번에?
나 혼자 봤는데.
만화 좋아하는 애들끼리 막 영화 보러 가고 그러지 않나? 아니 너 혼자 봤나 이번에?
근데 완전 반대야.
그지 만화 좋아하는 애들끼리 막 영화 보러 가고 그러지 않나? 아니 너 혼자 봤나 이번에?
나 혼자 봤는데. 와 근데 슈퍼플렉스 진짜 크더라.
그게 뭐야?
슈퍼플렉스가 영화관에서 진짜 큰 곳이 있어.
아니 근데 왜 뭐야 뭐 현진 리노 안 가고 혼자 갔어?
그러니까 그거 내가 너무 좋아하는 영화니까 사실 울 것도 같고 울 것도 같아가지고
아니 그냥 온전히 집중하고 싶었다.
Oh, that's so interesting. I have an ad in 1 second, but I want to talk about this afterwards. So this is so interesting, and I don't know what the helps him phrase it nicely means because this does not seem at all like what he's saying. Seungmin is trying to understand where Han is going with this, and he's trying to wrap it up nicely for Han because I would guess
그것도 같아가지고
he's sort of having a hard time figuring out where this is going, and he's trying to understand what Han is saying, and it's not working because this is not like he's trying to think of in his very sort of like practically minded brain. He's like, okay, you're saying you thought you'd cry and the movie was really important to you. So clearly what that means is that you want to focus on it and that experience. But I'm going to bet that what Han is about to say is not quite that.
내가
Let's see.
예전에 그 우리
Well, and then Han decides to try to explain using a narrative, which, you know, Felix does that too. And Felix and Seungmin obviously get along really well and understand each other really well. But I wonder... I have a feeling, so one, Felix probably doesn't do that as much with Seungmin because Felix is pretty chameleon-esque himself. But two, Felix is a little bit better at keeping a conversation on a track than Han is. And I'm sort of curious if Han has a hard time Seungmin has a hard time keeping up with Han's stories the way that I have a hard time keeping up with Han's stories.
친형이랑 신과 함께를 보러 갔었어. 나 연습생 때. 근데 나는 단 한 번도 영화를 보면서 가족 앞에서 울어본 적이 없었단 말이야. 근데 다 울고 나니까 너무 쪽팔렸어. 내가. 그래서 그 다음부터 내가 울 것 같아.
Yeah, okay. So that's what I thought Han was getting at is you know, I thought I'd cry and I didn't want to bring Lee No or Hyunjin with me if I was going to cry because that'd be embarrassing. And that seems like it would be pretty straightforward, but I kind of wonder if, like, to Seungmin, like, why would you care about these two people who you're really close to who are also interested in things? Like, Hyunjin also cries at everything. You and Lee No are, like... soulmate nesting partners. Like, why would it matter if you cried in front of them? That doesn't make sense to me. But like to Han, that's like an emotionality that he doesn't want other people to experience from him.
같은 영화는 그냥 혼자 봐.
약간 너도 약간 한 살 한 살 이렇게 시간 지나가면서 혼자 있는 시간 필요하지 않아?
그거야. 나는 오랫동안 혼자 있는 시간이 많았잖아. 훨씬 많았잖아 나는. 그래서 지금은 그냥 친구들 연락 와도 그 나가지 않더라도 전화하고 그러다 보니까 그쪽에서 받는 에너지도 있고.
너도 이렇게 딱 그 친한 무리가 이제 생겼으니까.
그치.
그러니까 다 음악으로 연결된 거네 어떻게 보면.
음악을 잘하는 애들은 뭔가 노는 것도 되게 음악적이게 놀겠지라고 생각을 했어. 아니야. 그냥
똑같아?
똑같아. 노래방을 진짜 많이 가. 진짜 많이 가.
약간 요새 비중이 랩 노래 이렇게 했을 때 몇 퍼센트 몇 퍼센트야?
나는 노래가 지금 거의
거의 90?
거의 90이지.
95?
Seungmin is finding common ground, which is work. Seungmin has been running this conversation and has found the opportunity to bring them to something they both understand, which is work.
내가 추구하는 느낌이 뭔지 알잖아. 나는 미성보다 완전 거친 목소리 좋아하고 그거 하려다 보니까 목이 이번에 제대로 갔지.
이제 너가 최근에 나랑 같은 쌤한테 레슨을 받기를 그건 좀 신기했지. 너는 원래 막 남들한테 막 되게 너 자체를 오픈하는 걸 되게 안 내켜 하잖아. 약간 뭐랄까
그치 뭔가 사려운 사람
쉽지
만나가지고 그런 거 하는데
않아 하는 걸 내가 아는데 이제 최근에 레슨 받고 싶다고 막 그렇게 나한테 물어봐가지고 좀 신기하긴 했어. 그렇게 마음 먹게 된 계기가 뭐야?
그러니까 먼 미래를 생각해 봤을 때 남아 있어야 되잖아. 나한테 뭔가가 기억과 행복한 추억 제외하고 그냥 내가 가지고 있는 실력이나 그런 거에 대해서 그냥 뭔가 남지가 않을 것 같았어. 그게 너무 크게 들었던 생각들이고 그리고 노래방 자주 간다고 했잖아. 이제 애들이랑 모여서 부를 때 잘하는 애들이 너무 부러운 거야.
아니 너가 부러워할 게 뭐가 있어?
뭔가
뭔가 그 동기부여가 확 됐구나.
Yeah, this is really interesting and I think really common as well for you know, that sort of like gifted kid. It's almost the inverse of gifted kid burnout. But I see it for people who have goals from when they are young that they accomplish very young also somewhat frequently. Those goals are not always necessarily you know, things like accomplishing something music-wise or, you know, like a career goal or a lot of times what I see is that the goal is to survive, right? For a lot of the people I see, what I find is they have goals that are very survival-oriented goals, right? Or very like kind of basic building a life foundation type goals. You know, they want to get out of their house and they want to find stable employment and they want to find a good life partner, right? Or they want to find a friend group, or, you know. So, but regardless of what the goals are, what you'll find is people who had goals that they had from when they were quite young. And then they accomplished those goals when they are also quite young. But they were never really actually like taught how to develop and refine goals and how to think into the future and things like that. Because, you know, those were sort of goals they had, not because they had the skill of developing goals, but because they were young people in situations and they sort of needed to find motivational goals in order to get through those situations. You know, if you want to survive in the idol industry, you have to become very, 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 very motivated and have very, like, strong goals of getting to a certain type of place. And then you hit those goals, but again, you never really necessarily actually learned how to develop goals, how to do that. Like, Again, daydreaming is really, really important to people. Part of goal development is learning how to daydream appropriately. So, they never really learned how to do dreaming. They never really learned how to envision different possibilities for a future. They never really learned the difference between envisioning a really far off future and envisioning like tomorrow. This is especially difficult as well for people who have complex relationships with time. If people have a lot of dissociation, or if people are ADHD, or, anything that deeply affects how they perceive time, it's incredibly difficult to perceive that, like, I'm going to need goals for 6 months from now. Right? What the fuck is 6 months from now? 6 months from now might as well be 10 years from now, and 3 weeks from now might as well be 6 months from now. So it becomes really complex. You hit those goals, like those initial sort of like young person goals from when that was more of like an adventure, or when there was more like need to have those goals in order to survive situations, like you were in a much higher stress situation and you had to rely on, this is going to be worth it because I'm going to get this from it. You hit those goals and it ends up feeling like you completed the game, right? You played a game, you completed the game, and you're not really into side quests. And everything else feels like a side quest, right? Because there's really no actual development of the motivation system. There's no actual like perception of what you do next or why you care about it. And in addition, it's a lot harder to care about goals for positive emotions if a lot of your goals have been developed through this suffering has to be worth it because it'll come with this at the end, right? Okay, well now I have this and now I don't have to suffer anymore. Well then fuck, how am I supposed to be motivated to do anything? And so people have to kind of figure out like what they're motivated towards afterwards. They have to figure out like, what am I interested in now? What actually, gets me excited about doing something. It sounds like Han sort of hit that point where he no longer had to have goals that he built from running away from something, right? Running away from sort of pain, fear, running away from like anxiety, from perfectionism, etc., and could instead build goals based on like actual joy planning and like what actually pulls his interest, and from a much mentally healthier and more adult perspective. And eventually he had to go like, shit, I'm gonna have to actually like expand my horizon if I'm going to find life interesting. Because yeah, just like the hope of creating happy memories in the future, that doesn't make life interesting. And Han is definitely someone who, it does become more intrigued by an interest-based motivation system, to put it into very academic terms.
동기부여도 되고 그건 것 같아. 스트레이키즈라는 이름이 굉장히 운이 좋게도 너무 많이 이제 사람들에게 알려지게 됐잖아. 그럼 그 사람들이 기대하는 게 있을 거고, 나도 뭔가 데뷔 초부터 프레임이 모든 걸 잘 올라온다잖아. 그러니까 어느 곳에서든 내가 마이크를 잡고 노래를 하거나 랩을 했을 때 사람들이 1차원적으로 기대하는 그걸 넘어서야 얘네가 왜 이렇게 됐는지 이해가 되겠다 라는 거를 심어주고 싶어. 그게 제일 컸어. 그냥 내가 가지고 있는 이름이 이제 많이 무겁고 책임감을 가져야 하는 이름이니까. 그치?
근데
Ooh, actually, I want to see what Seungmin has to say about this before I have something to say
다들
about
그렇게
it.
생각하고 있는 것 같아서 너무 좋아. 왜냐면 옛날에는 내가 막 노래를 되게 그냥 혼자 관심 가지고 혼자 하는 느낌이었거든. 요새는 그냥 다들 노래에 관심도 많고 덩달아 나도 좋은 기운을 많이 받는 것 같아. 그래서 요새 너무 좋고
가끔
덩달아 나도 좋은 기운을 많이 다들 그렇게 생각하고 있는 것 같아서 너무 좋아. 왜냐면 옛날에는 내가 막 노래를 되게 그냥 혼자 관심 가지고 혼자 하는 느낌이었거든. 요새는 그냥 다들 노래에 관심도 많고 덩달아 나도 좋은 기운을 많이 받는 것 같아. 그래서 요새 너무 좋고
가끔 승민이 형 이런 대화를 해요. 항상 저한테 너는 잘하고 있다라고 이제 말을 많이 해주는 게 이제 창빈이 형이랑 승민이가 제일 그렇게 얘기를 해주는데 그런 것들이 되게 고맙죠. 항상 이제 뭔가 이거 아닌 것 같은데 뭔가 예전보다 실력이 더 떨어진 것 같은데 아닌가 막 이렇게 갈팡질팡하고 있을 때마다 항상 그렇게 말로써라도 저를 좀 잡아주려고 하죠. 그래서 그게 고맙죠. 승래
Yeah, this is also very much in line with that sort of gifted kid burnout sort of thing. Because yeah, he's in a place where he could be making goals based on his own happiness, but instead he's building goals based. He's finding reasons to continue to make goals based on that fear motivation, right? The fear of failing, the expectations of others, the fear of failing his own name, the fear of failing what he's already lived up to, you know, the fear that like he's going to somehow lose progress, lose capacity, that he's going to fall behind, which is unfortunate. You know, he doesn't have to be building goals based on that. He doesn't have to be doing that to himself. It's a pretty detrimental thing to do to yourself. And when I've found exceptionally skilled people who continue building their skills based in that mindset, usually those people will seemingly excel throughout their 20s, and they find me in their 30s. And it's not like they like necessarily say quit their fields or whatever. Sometimes they do. Sometimes it results in full career burnout, but a lot of times it results in us having to have some really, really hard conversations about how much they need to pull back on what they're doing. And how much, you know, they can love what they're doing as much as they like, and also it has and is continuing to destroy them. And if they do not pull back, it will continue to destroy them. And sometimes they believe me early on, and sometimes they don't, and things get really, really bad. Usually they do. You know, usually they're finding me because something's already falling apart. It's their relationship that's already falling apart, or they're getting angry more frequently, or they they have to find a new job for various reasons and are realizing that this feels intimidating in a way that is almost paralyzing, or, you know, things like that. So I hope Han unlearns that method of goal setting sooner than that. Because that's not a great one. I do think it sounds like things get offset some by having people like Seungmin and Changbin around him to remind him, like, no, you are doing really well. You're living up to your name. You don't need to do this to yourself in this way, right? It's good to continue to feel competent and to up your skills and to connect people over that. Like, that's really effective. And I'd never say that, you know, someone shouldn't do that, especially someone who, this is very much a guess. This is much more into speculation than I like normally get. So I'm saying that with like a big asterisk here, but someone who I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Han had like savant syndrome. I've known a couple people with savant syndrome, and yeah, this is something where like it is so important to them to continue to level up their skills in these things that they are exceptional at. And there's all of this societal pressure to level up those skills, or they perceive it that way. There's they have this perception that what life is about is constantly getting better and constantly doing more, and that what success is just a constant stream upwards, that you're just always building, you're always improving. And part of that is because of their connection to their craft. But a lot of that is because they are told from such a young age how exceptional they are. And they are pressured from such a young age to be exceptional. And how much that ends up being their main source of attention and love is their exceptionalness at, the thing that they are a savant at. And that, again, it can sort of perpetuate for a while, and it eventually falls apart. It's just not sustainable for someone's entire life. It's just really, really not. It's it starts, that level of wanting and needing to improve or to do more or to reach further. It becomes so unsustainable eventually, and it eventually becomes nearly impossible to get the returns that you used to be able to get, right? Like skill curves get higher, and eventually you're near the top. And then you're, 40, you're near the absolute top globally of your skill curve, and all you know is how to think you need to do more. But there's only so much more you can do. I've only seen that twice, but of very specifically that curve in that extremity. But I have seen it twice to that extremity. And I have seen it a lot more to we're not talking global, but we're talking more localized levels of that same feeling.
부른 것 중에 너가 홀돈 써준 게 제일 그 팬분들한테도 약간 잔향이 되게 깊고 거기 댓글창을 내가 진짜 가끔 봐, 힘들 때. 거기에 너 나중에 최신수 눌러서 딱 보면은 팬분들이 자기 일화랑 이제 그런 얘기들을
Seungmin just goes and reads comments on some of the YouTube videos? Oh, that's so cute.
엄청 길게 적어주셔.
맞아.
진짜 많거든. 모든 스토리들이 진짜 많아. 근데 너가 그런 걸 보면서도 그냥 한편으로는 되게 영감 많이 받겠다는 생각도 해봤고 되게 따뜻해서 약간 인류에 떨어질 때 보면은 너무 좋아. 그래서 그 곡이 진짜 나한테도 너무 좀 소중한 곡이야. 그래서 가끔 찾아 들어.
이게 되게 작곡가로서는 굉장히 고맙고.
사실 그 곡 하나 쓴다는 거에 대해서 진짜 얼마나 어렵고 그게 진짜 대단한 일인지 너무 잘 알고 있어서.
이게 사람마다 다 다르겠지만 나는 쉬워. 그게 멤버나 내가 하고 싶은 거나 그냥 미니멀한 곡들이나 그게 쉬운데 제일 어려운 게 뭔지 알아? 스트레이키즈 곡 만드는 게 제일 어려워.
그렇지.
그게 제일 어려워.
어렵지.
스트레이키즈 곡은
소재도 어렵고
일단 기본적으로 주제 같은 게 명확해야 되잖아. 에너지가 있어야 되잖아. 스트레이키즈.
Yeah, so the two of them know how to function together when they are talking about music. Like very clearly that is where they are comfortable. A little bit, I'm reminded a little bit about Min-chan. Obviously different. It's different, but there's a bit of a similarity there of like, okay, now we're talking about work and everything's a lot easier to talk about. Oh, we got another ad. Nope, that's the wrong button. There you go.
에너지가 있어.
그리고 뭔가 강력하면서도 위트 있어야 되고
그러니까
재밌어야 돼.
그러니까 나는 스트레이키즈 곡을 쓸 때는 머리를 쓰고 내가 하는 곡을 할 때는 좀 더 감성을 쓰는 것 같아. 감정을.
맞아. 특유의 너만의 그 곡 감성이 있거든. 그 어디서도 진짜 나올 수 없어. 이거는
agreed.
말로 설명할 수 없는 그 감성이 있는데 그거를 그냥 내가 듣기에는 너의 감성에 내 목소리를 얹었을 때 되게 재밌는 그게 나오는 것 같아. 촉촉하고 약간 노래가 말라 있지 않아서 그 모드들이. 그래서 뭔가 그런
I do
것도
really
있어.
love
너를
how much
얘기할
the two
때나
of them are
너의
like
그런
each
감성이나
other's favorite
것들을-
musicians.
내가 혹시나
It's really cute.
이 무언가를 변화시키고 있진 않은가라는 거에 대해서 그래서 뭔가 깊은 얘기를 할 때도 되게 조심스러운 경향이 있어 솔직하게. 사소한 거는 뭐 그렇다 쳐도 그냥 그 특유의 그 감성이 있거든. 찬이 형이나 창빈이 형은 되게 이게 상상으로 하거나 그런 경우가 많다고 생각을 하는데 너는 이제 너가 느끼는 마음 한구석에 있는 그런 것들을 토대로 상상을 해서 쓰는 느낌이란 말이야. 그래서 그런 영역을 건드릴 때 되게 조심스러워.
뭔 말인지 알겠어.
너가 지금 느끼고 있는 것들이나 그 너의 태가 그대로 곡에 반영이 돼.
내 정서가 그게 곡에 반영이 된다고?
정서도 어떻게
약간
보면 맞지.
형태, 내 지금
그러니까
형태.
너의 이 기운을 딱 봤을 때 그게 그렇게 대입이 돼요. 곡에.
This is fascinating. This tells me that I think Seungmin has probably spent a decent amount of time trying to figure out Han because he does not understand Han. And so he's gotten to this point of intellectualization, especially around the music, right? The music is where Seungmin has to understand the songwriter. Or at least it sounds like that's sort of what he's saying, is that like, you know, if he's going to perform something, he really wants to understand, you know, if he can, the perspective of the person who's written the song. And so he has really thoroughly tried to understand Han Pop so that he can do justice to the music. And that means that he has had to understand Han to some extent to do that. And so very suddenly he is almost more in touch with how Han functions in this way than Han might even be, or they're just like trying to figure out what the other person is saying in like slightly different language. Whereas before he was like pretty out of tune with what Han was saying. So that's sort of interesting that like there's this space where Seungmin really had to figure out Han, despite the fact that they are really not similar people at all. And not in the same way where like Seungmin and Changbin are different, but like at their core, they're very, very similar. Like Han and Seungmin are just people who seem like they struggle to understand each other, but they respect each other as musicians so much that like they do want to understand that aspect, which requires a decent amount of intellectualization about the other person to do it. That's pretty interesting.
시즌별로 그래서 달라요 이게.
맞아.
옛날에는 락도 그렇고 막 그 비트감이 되게 빠르고 이렇게 쏘아붙인 거 했다면 요새 되게
좀 더 유한 걸 하지.
되게 촉촉하고 그런 거여서 또 그런 영역을 건드리고 싶지 않은 것이다. 그 내면 안에는 엄청나게 깊은 감성들과 그냥 진짜 사람들은 절대 흉내낼 수 없는 그런 것들을 담아내는 능력을 가지고 있어서 그게 되게 특별해서 본체의 모습마저 되게 신비롭게 느껴지.
I think what I really love about this is Seungmin's ability to simultaneously do two things, right? Both hold that he knows Han pretty well. 70%, especially for somebody like Han, that's quite well, right? Like Han doesn't really open up. He has a hard time letting people in. It takes a much longer time. So, you know, knowing him 70%, that's a lot, but like it's still not, especially for someone like Seungmin who the people he understands so fucking well. That would feel like a lot of a distance. And he's able to hold simultaneously that like we're different people who are probably never going to really understand each other. And he has so much love and respect for him at the same time. I think a lot of people really, really struggle to have like deep love and respect and care and compassion for people who they don't really understand. And I think it's a very special quality that Seungmin has, to be able to recognize the qualities in Han that he finds very special and he cares a lot about, and he wants to help like provide shelter for and wants to help grow, while he also acknowledges that like we're two people who are probably never really gonna like get each other.
특별해서 본체의 모습마저 되게 신비롭게 느껴지는 느낌이 있는 사람인 것 같아요.
나는 되게 힘들었을 때 너한테 진짜 많이 물었어. 너는 뭐가 인생의 낙이야?
아, 그지?
너
많이
인생의
물어봤어.
낙이.
Oh, that's devastating. Oh. Wow. Oh. Yeah, that's rough. Whew. And you know, the thing is that like, yes, Han is happy now, as he keeps saying. He's doing a lot better. I do not believe that he has mastered the skill of, you know, building for joy rather than building away from pain in, you know, a year. I just don't think that's just very unlikely. You know, I think he's still learning that. I think he's done a lot of work in whatever areas it is. He's clearly done a lot of work to be able to feel so much more stable. But like that, when you're at the point when you're starting to ask the people around you, what is the joy in your life? That is a rough point. And when you're asking that a lot, that question would frighten me. If one of my friends kept asking me that question, I would be scared. I would be scared. I would be talking to them about suicidality. You know, I'm gonna teach y'all a good, quick, useful trick. And by trick, I mean ways to save somebody's life. A lot of people think that if they were worried that a friend or somebody else is dealing with suicidality, that they should not bring it up. The same thing with self-harm. They think I should not bring it up because then it's going to make them think about it and make them like more likely to do it, which is not the case. People who are struggling with ideation, being asked, you know, ways to help support them, is not going to be the thing that like triggers them into doing something. A lot of people also just don't know how to. They don't know how to ask the question. So the like really pivotal, useful way to, you know, if somebody asks you a question or says something that concerns you. So if I had a friend who kept asking me, hey, what's your joy in life? You know, they asked me once, they asked me twice. It's like, okay, they're like asking some questions. But if it's clear that they're not doing well and they're asking me this question multiple times, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to say to them like, hey, this might not apply to you, in which case, like, that's fine. But when people say things like that, sometimes when people say something like that or ask something like that, what it means is that they are struggling with suicidality. And I really love you and I really care about you. So I want to ask you if that is something that you are struggling with right now or in general recently. You make it be a yes or no question. You ask up front. You ask about the word itself. You don't ask like, are you doing okay? You don't move around the subject. You don't try to like hedge it. You ask very upfront, direct. Sometimes when people say something like that, they are struggling with suicidality. Is that something you are currently struggling with? And then there's, you know, a lot of things that come after that. You can, you know, do a variety of assessing for resources, assessing for means, assessing for intent, et cetera, and so forth. But that's how you bring up the question. And yeah, if somebody was repeatedly asking me that question, I would be asking them about suicidality right back, 100%. Yeah.
뭐냐? 너는 뭐가 행복하냐?
표정까지 기억나.
그때 되게 내 기준에선 사실 그게 왜 행복한 건지는 모르는 답변들이 많이 나왔는데 지금에서야 깨달아. 아, 이런 것들이 되게 행복하구나.
난 그때 뭐 큰 거 얘기 안 하지 않았었어?
너도 그냥 이제 가끔 뭐 정인이랑 뭐 밖에 나가서 순대국밥에 너무 그냥 그거니까 너무
소소한
일상적이고 소소한 거니까. 근데 내가 그런 소소한 것들을
I'm amazed he got out of that. I'm so glad he did. I don't know how he did. I don't know what he did. Maybe he was going to, you know, weekly therapy. Maybe he found a good cocktail of medications. Maybe he just figured it out on his own. I am amazed that he, especially during 2023 when there was so much pressure on 5-star, when there was so much pressure on, you know, doing things well, when the Maniac tour was going on and like things were so hectic and chaotic, like, you know, community resiliency does a lot for things. And obviously, they also lost a friend to suicide in 2023. And that is something that's really devastating. It's also something that sometimes you see the people around you reacting to something like that, and it motivates you to try to figure out how to not be in a similar situation yourself. Obviously, that's total speculation, but like, you know, what he's talking about and the level that he's talking about right now, knowing that they are not going to discuss the worst of a situation on something like 2KidsRoom, you know, we knew Han was doing bad, and this just tells me that he was doing really bad, and I think it's really fucking impressive. Whatever he was doing to move away from that space, it's really fucking impressive, considering how much has been going on in their lives, you know, since forever, frankly.
안 했었으니까.
그지. 뭔가 그냥 알려줄 수는 없는 부분이고.
Yeah, you can.
그렇다고
You
싫어하는데
just,
억지로 시킬 수도 없는 부분이고.
그치.
you can teach it, you can't force someone to do it. But I wouldn't expect Seungmin to know how to teach it. He has not yet gotten his master's degree in, you know, therapeutic studies, though I think he should consider it. I maintain Seungmin would be an excellent therapist.
그래서 그 기간이 참 짧지도 않았고 되게
엄청 길었지.
근데 언젠가는 끝날 줄 알았어. 지금 요새는 되게 보기 좋아.
나는 지금 너무 행복해. 그러니까 그때를 되돌아보면 뭔가 그거였어. 내가 나 같은 애가 한 명 더 있었으면 내가 정말 좋고, 내 어둘 때 시절에 한 명 있었으면 난 걔가 진짜 불편했을 것 같아. 나라면 되게 불편했을 것 같거든. 근데 그냥 이제 지켜봐 주고
This is going so
불편했을
fast,
것 같아. 나라면
and I'm trying to read while
내
processing.
어둘 때 시절에 한 명 있었으면 난 걔가 진짜 불편했을 것 같아. 나라면 되게 불편했을 것 같거든. 근데 그냥 이제 지켜봐 주고 뭐 잘 도와주고 해가지고 지금은 괜찮아졌잖아. 그래서 그것도 고맙고 이제 잘해야지. 이제 예전처럼
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like he's acknowledging that, like, a lot of what did it was, you know, having that community support, was having people watch over him, even people who didn't really understand him or didn't really understand what he was going through, being really dedicated to taking care of him. Yeah, I mean, community support really, really goes a long way.
그러지 말고 정말 잘해야지.
아니 그냥 그런 생각도 하지 마. 그냥 지금처럼 하면 돼.
아, 난 지금 너무 좋아. 지금 뭔가 너무
I love him. Oh.
고맙고 이제 잘해야지. 이제
Yeah, because this is devastating, right? And this again, we come back to like, I think Han is clearly doing worlds better. I don't think that he's like necessarily doing great. I think there's still a lot of work to be done for him. Or else he's going to be at risk of, relapse or collapse into that emotional state, because like even thinking about this, right, I'm really curious about, this idea of like almost the members took care of me and now I have to be better. I can't go back to what I was at before, right? The level, there's like guilt, and like there's this unjustified guilt behind that. There's this level of shame behind that. There's this perfectionism behind that. There's almost a self-hatred, potentially, even, right? Even if it's a hatred of a past self, or at least a severe dislike of a past self, a distrust of a past self. Even talking about having a kid like my old self would be really uncomfortable for me, right? Like, this disconnect between who he is now and who he used to be, and why that happened. This attempt to dissociate himself from his past. That's still a lot of strong difficulties, right? That's still indicating like there's a lot going on in his mindset and his beliefs about who he is and how he's meant to move through the world that are not like healthy, adaptive, self-compassionate kind beliefs. There's still work to be done there. And I would expect that, right? Talking about the level of low that he got to, which sounds a lot like what happens with burnout, but talking about the level of low that he got to, I would not expect somebody to be like, graduated from therapy, as it were, by this point. And I love him saying this.
예전처럼 그러지 말고 정말 잘해야지.
And Seungmin just being like, no, like, you don't owe us shit. Like, you don't need to think like that. You don't need to think like, I don't need to be that person anymore. I need to, prove myself. I need to be better for us. Like, don't do that. Just like keep being happy. Just all we want is for you to be happy. That's really lovely.
지금 뭔가 너무 편하고 힘든 것도 없고 그게
요새 많이 좀 내려놓고 어떤 환경이든지 좀 잘 적응하려고 하는 것 같아서 아까 처음에 카멜레온이라고 말씀을 드렸던 것 같아요. 겁이 많은 카멜레온, 겁이 많은 다람쥐.
아틀란티스. 아까 제가 처음 말한 미지의 아이라는 아까도 비슷하잖아요. 점점 실력을 갈고 닦을수록 바닷물이 점점 내려가면서 정말 거대하고 화려한 해저의 모습이 조금씩 더 나오고 있는 것 같아요. 승민 지금.
Oh, this is an interesting potential projection, actually, that we're seeing here. So, let's talk about what projection is. So usually when we're talking about projection, we're talking about negative traits. It's a defense mechanism, but sometimes it can be positive traits too. So what happens with projection is that we project, again, usually negative feelings, often about ourselves, onto another person. So, there's... I'm really angry at myself. I'm going to project that somebody else is angry at me, right? What can also happen is that you project positive traits that you don't want to acknowledge as part of yourself onto somebody else. So I'm not saying that he doesn't actually see Seungmin this way, but I am saying that he potentially sees himself this way as well, right? This could be a great descriptor for him as he becomes more settled, as he appreciates himself more, as he appreciates his skills more, as he takes care of himself better. He is getting just cooler and he's getting more impressive, and, you know, that water is receding. And he's using this metaphor for Seungmin. And this is probably a set of qualities that he sees in other people. And it's potentially because he wants to feel like that about himself as well. Now, that was all very potentially. I don't do psychoanalysis like that, where I'm saying that, like, that's what's happening. But that is a potential psychoanalytic reading. It would be a series of questions. I'd ask some questions about it to see if that were accurate, if you were my client. There's an ad going. Okay.
지금보다 더 멋있어질 거고, 지금은 한 애틀랜티스가 이거만큼 정도 나온 것 같고, 더 이렇게 되면은 경력이 더 쌓이면은 그때는 완벽한 애틀랜티스.
See, I feel exactly this way about Han. Can somebody send this to Han?
나중에 우리 둘 음악적인 걸로 어디에
Can someone just say that same thing to him? Like, buddy, see yourself in as positive a light as you see your friends.
뭔가 나중에 우리 둘 음악적인 걸로 어디에 던져놨을 때 어디에도 안 꿀리는 그런, 다 부셔버릴 수 있는,
그렇게 되고 싶다.
언젠가 한번 오지 않을까. 난 계속 고민을 하거든.
뭔 말인지 너무 잘 알아.
둘이 하세요 했을 때
뭘 줄게?
다 납득시킬 수
I'm,
있는.
whenever
믿고
this
있어.
unit song happens,
예술적,
I'm ready.
음악적인 그런 감성은 많이 이렇게 제가 흡수를 해서 한이 곡을 표현을 할 때 좀 잘할 수 있는 것 같아.
It really feels like music is where they communicate in a way that makes sense to each other, right? Like, they can understand each other and their perspectives through music in a way that doesn't work as well when they try to communicate just with spoken language.
구성이 좀 꽉 찬 밴드곡 한번 제대로 시원하게 불러보고 싶긴 하네요, 둘이서. 내일이 없는 것처럼.
음악으로 좀 더 깊이 관여하잖아, 댕카스는. 친구로서도 너무 좋은 친구고, 그러니까 사람으로서도 내가 너무 좋아하는 사람이고, 난 너가 노래 부를 때라든가 아니면 너가 행복한 걸 할 때라든가 아니면 너가 진짜 좋아하는 걸 할 때 그 열정이 나는 너무 보기 좋고, 그게 나한테 어느 정도 동기부여가 되거든.
든든한.
Yeah, it seems like having Seungmin, who does have so many like goals and motivations based around things that he is like actually excited and passionate about, and based around like little joys and little happinesses, and like who does recognize joy on small to large scales, is something that is really inspirational for Han in a really healthy way. Right? That he can have these people around him who do experience motivation in a much healthier way, and who do experience life in a way that can be good modeling, right? Like, he has role models in his peers. And it is so useful to have role models in your peers, especially your peers who you're around all the time, right? Who are your really good friends. If you can get past anxiety about like, am I ever going to be as good as my friends at XYZ? If you can move past that, you can actually take that information and really grow in those directions, and it can be hugely beneficial.
거 진짜 사실이거든. 너가 제일 그 소중하다는 생각을 항상 하고, 마음 안 다치고 같이 진짜 오래오래 했으면 좋겠어. 나한테 약간 올해보다 중요한 거 없거든.
되게 힘들 때 그
Nobody loves Stray Kids more than Seungmin loves Stray Kids. Nothing matters more to me than a really long time. He just wants his friends to be together forever.
항상 하고 마음 안 다치고 같이 진짜 오래오래 했으면 좋겠어. 나한테 약간 오래보다 중요한 건 없거든.
되게 힘들 때 그 정서적으로 기댈 수도 있는 사람이고 동갑이지만 그냥 멋있어요. 그냥 본업을 빼고 보더라도 굉장히 닮고 싶어요.
나름대로의 힘든 시간이 많이 있었지만 그래도 마음의 문을 열고 지금처럼 좀 건강히 있어줘서 멤버로서 너무 고마운 것 같고 그냥 오늘은 좀 장난기 많이 빼고 따뜻했고 좋은 시간이었습니다.
그래, 너 그렇게 있어. 자, 하나, 둘, 셋.
김지성 그냥 지금처럼만 서로 옆에 잘 있어줬으면 좋겠다. 너와 내가 사랑하고 잘하고 싶은 음악 오래오래 붙어서 해보자. 너가 있어서 참 다행이고 든든하다. 올해는 외면도 내면도 단단해진 것 같아서 보기 좋다. 수고. 승.
행복을 찾아 노래하는 너가 좋다. 불분명하지 않고 항상 정확히 빛나는 꿈이 있는 너가 좋다. 건강하자, 행복하고 자유롭게 날자. Let's go.
Oh, I'm crying. Oh, this is really, really sweet. I think that this honestly is something where this hits a lot harder if you read between all the lines of this conversation, right? You know, I'm thinking about Seungmin and some of the lines of the music as well. You know, I haven't done my deep dive on my theory that Get Lit is a song about suicide, but I have a theory that Get Lit is a song about suicide. And, you know, that would sort of align with some of this. You know, Seungmin's note here is all about wanting Han to still be here, right? Like how glad he is that Han is here. How glad he is that he is able to make music that they both love with him. You know, the things, that sort of strengths-based perspective of like, this year you seem to be doing better. It's really nice to see that you're doing better, right? Like that's important to him because he's, you know, he loves him. So like this is all about that reaffirmation of that love, and that love is permanent, right? That love is going to keep going, and that Seungmin doesn't want to lose these things that they do together. And then
행복을 찾아 노래하는 너가 좋다. 불분명하지 않고 항상
this note is all about those aspects that Han admires about Seungmin, right? And Han's pointing out things that like he probably sees as the things that keep Seungmin going, that keep Seungmin here. I think that a lot of people who have struggled with suicidality in the past, which I really think it's very, very, very likely that Han has. I don't know if he's said so as explicitly as Chan has said that he has. I don't recall, but based on, you know, various things, I suspect that Han has. I sometimes find it very surprising to find out that there are people who have not struggled with suicidal ideation or self-harm ideation. You know, obviously I don't know if Seungmin has or hasn't, but being able to sort of identify these things that, you know, what people who don't necessarily always see that like other, like this is not the typical experience. Intense suicidality is not the typical experience. They start to try to find like, okay, why does this person stay here, right? It's not necessarily it's not necessarily a why does this person also struggle with suicidality? It's really more of a why does this person not sort of type of question. And so he's sort of noting like, here are the things that he sees as why Seungmin finds happiness, why Seungmin continues to do what he does, right? He's incorporated the answers to those questions that he'd always ask. That a lot of it has to do with music and with people and with his dreams and with having these sort of like clear, defined dreams and goals, rather than sort of like really uncertain, vague ones. And that desire to stay together and happy and feel free, right? But like a lot of this is just about how he does look up to Seungmin and how he does want to model after him in that way. And that information that like did help him during, you know, his hardest time.
행복하고 자유롭게 날자. Let's go.
I think that's really, really beautiful to see that back and forth. And I think that it shows, again, like these are two people who do not communicate in similar ways. These are two people who are very different people, who think in very different ways, who perceive the world in very different ways, who don't really understand how the other person's mind works. And I think it really goes to show how much two people who are very, very different and who align in very few ways can still love each other really deeply and can still be really meaningful to each other and can still be really powerful forces in each other's lives. I think it's a misconception that you have to be in deep alignment with somebody to have really meaningful relationship. That's just not true. You know, generally it's going to be easier to develop meaningful relationship with those people. And certainly the two of them could not function if they were their only relationships, right? If these two were the only like good friendship in each other's lives, I think it'd be really frustrating for both of them, right? These two can meet very specific needs of each other and would probably really struggle with a lot of other needs. But when you view the world from the perspective of like, yeah, different people solve for different needs in our lives. Different people bring different things to us, and it's okay, right? No one's gonna be able to meet all of our needs, and most people are only gonna be able to meet some of them. And when we just let people fit into the right spheres in our lives, you can still build something really, really beautiful that's really powerful, even if that is not the relationship that on a day-to-day level you are like thinking about as your best friend, right? That's really lovely. That's really, really lovely. And I think, yeah, you know, being able to see how much this was a very like vulnerable conversation, I think, from Han, and probably to an extent Seungmin too. This is some of the most I think we've really gotten from Han about his, like, he's talked a lot about like the time, like when he was having a hard time and stuff, but I think as far as like my personal insight into how that time must have gone for him and the people around him, I think that this is some of the most like concrete, like, okay, I'm really feeling like I get the vibe of what was going on. And it sounds like it was really fucking awful. It sounds like it was really fucking awful. Like, you know, when everything's said and done. So I'm glad they had each other. Somebody sent in chat, I think, a useful question. Is it concerning that Stray Kids seem to feel like they haven't achieved enough? Yeah, I'm generally concerned about that. I think I've brought it up a few times, though, about a few of the different members. And, you know, I think that there's a slight difference between the members who seem to feel like they haven't achieved enough versus the members who simply want to continue achieving more. if that delineation makes sense. So I think that there's people who are like, yeah, this is all great, but like now all that's behind us. We're not necessarily still celebrating how much we've done. We have so much more to get to. And then there's the people who are like, it's really cool that we have these achievements and that's super dope. And we'd like more achievements. And like, I have more things I want to achieve because again, they have a career and like, you have to have goals in your career or else like, what are we doing? Right. So like, I think that there is a differential there, right? I think there is, some important nuance in how they approach things. But yeah, the ones who really feel like, oh, we haven't done that much yet, or like, oh, I haven't done enough yet. Because usually that's what it is. Usually it's them being like, I haven't done enough yet. If you hear them talk about their members, they're super duper proud of their other members and they think their members are doing great, but like, I still have more to do. Those members concern me, and I think I bring it up pretty much every time it sort of comes up. And this is sort of why like Han concerns me in this episode. Seungmin, I don't know because Seungmin, when he's talked about future achievements, he's usually talked about like, I want to be a group that like stands the test of time, which is like a huge fucking goal. That is a lifetime goal. I don't know if it means that Seungmin never feels like they've accomplished anything because they haven't accomplished that goal yet, or if mentally he's like, that's my dream, but going up to that dream, I've got a whole bunch of goals and a whole bunch of accomplishments that get us there, and every time I hit one of those, I am excited and I am capable of celebrating that win, and I like still feel that accomplishment and that sense of accomplishment, and I'm still really proud of it. Because if that's the mentality, then that's great, right? I'm not worried about that. But if the mentality is, well, that's fine, but it's not us standing the test of time. Well, that's fine, but it's not us standing the test of time, et cetera, and so forth. Then, yeah, that's not going to be sustainable for the rest of your life. So that's my thoughts on that. I don't think there were any other real comments in chat, which is good because this has been a longer than average reaction. The only other comment, unrelated, no, I do not smell bleach when I exercise. That's a new one. I haven't heard that one.